Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. Hi, hello, my name is Loey. I just started off this video in a different clip and like rambled for 2 minutes because I'm so nervous to start this video and I'm so nervous to talk about this experience. Also, I'm trying a thing where I'm letting my natural hair do its thing. Hope you enjoy Loey the Lion. All right, so I met Peggy the Doll and I don't want to dance around the fact that this was hands down, no matter what I've ever said in the past, I know I can be dramatic. I know that every single paranormal story time is like out the window with how big and crazy it is, and that's because I don't tell you guys like the, oh, something went bump in the night stories. It's because I save my stories for when they are big and dramatic and crazy. But this one is by far the craziest, and I've needed a few days to process it. A lot of you will have already known that I made a video like last week, probably when you're watching this, on the Zak Bagans Haunted Museum. My goodness, the comments were flooded with people letting me know I mispronounced his last name. I mean, obviously I've heard it said like that. I've also heard it said like Bagans. So obviously it was an honest mistake, but I went to the Zak Bagans Haunted Museum and I made a whole video kind of before that, just talking about some of the most haunted things there. One thing that I was unprepared for, one thing I didn't even know existed there until I was in line at the museum, was Peggy the Doll. I have made a video about Peggy like a long time ago. Now, Peggy is an interesting case in the sense that they say that even just by seeing a photo of her, you can become afflicted. And I shared in my video that basically after seeing a photo of her, I saw like a shadow behind me and thought it could be somewhat interesting, but was never 100% convinced. It did seem sort of crazy to me that there was something so powerful that it could afflict you through a computer screen. I can be a little bit skeptical. As much as I am so firmly a believer in the paranormal and so firmly someone who believes other people's experiences, has tons of my own, I don't doubt that the paranormal is real. I just occasionally do look at other reasonings behind paranormal happenings, and I don't always believe every single paranormal story that I'm told. Not because I think the person telling it to me or because the case or whatever, because it's a lie, just because maybe I feel like I'm missing information, or I feel like the person experiencing it may have not factored in this or that or whatever it might be. People's imaginations run away with them all the time, and I'm certainly guilty of that. I literally heard a raccoon in the dumpster of my office building earlier and called my brother, like, get up here, I think I just heard gunshots. So I'm like totally someone who can be super overdramatic and just jump to conclusions and get scared really easily. But that being said, Peggy the Doll, it was interesting to me as I was standing in line, basically at the Haunted Museum in Vegas. You stand in line to like stand in a separate line. It's a really busy tour, like tons of people come. It's not very expensive either. Plus they legit have like tour guides escorting you from room to room and telling you everything. So it's like a high production thing. Like there's a lot of moving parts, and so the lines were super long, and while we were in them, my friends and I was just watching this screen with all of this backstory on the Haunted Museum, and of course Peggy comes up. And I'm like, oh my god, cool, had no idea she was here, like, sup sis, made a video about you. More so, I was excited about seeing the Dybbuk box. I was excited about seeing the rocking chair since I was unaware until I got there that it had been reopened. I was excited for other things, but I was not expecting to have such an interaction with Peggy the Doll, to the point where I spoke with it and left the room in tears because it was so overwhelming. So I'm gonna kind of start at the beginning of the tour. I don't want to give away everything because I do think it's really important, if you are someone who believes in the paranormal, if you enjoy paranormal experiences, if you would like to experience something like this, that you don't just take my word for it, that you go and experience it yourself. So I'm not going to give you a walkthrough of everything, but I will talk about what I felt the most affected in. And kind of where everything started for me and where I started to feel pretty uneasy was in a room in which they had the real van of a doctor. His name was Zak Bagans, and that's probably a horrible pronunciation of that too. Now I feel very self-conscious about how I'm saying names, but he killed at least 130 people in his van, essentially, if not closer to 200, which is what I think they said at the museum. What's crazy is he didn't even spend that long in prison, from what I understand, because he was killing his patients who had terminal illnesses. And essentially they were all not, I mean, this is debatable, but not murders, but assisted suicide. And so like there was the actual van that it occurred in the Haunted Museum, and the minute that I walked into that room, my legs just started like shaking, like literally just like violently shaking. The energy in that room was unimaginable. There was nothing I could have done to have prepared myself for that moment. Before then, it was kind of fun and interesting, and like just like learning about different spooky things through history and seeing all of these insane things that you know that this guy like Zak Bagans had collected from all of his like crazy adventures across the world that he deemed to be haunted or freaky or whatever, and just had history. Up until then, it was just fun, and then you get to that room and just like the reality of what had occurred in that van was so, it just hit you in the face. And there was just so much energy in there. My legs just like started shaking, and that room was the first time that I like swallowed and tasted something metallic, like it was blood, but it wasn't blood. It was very, very bizarre. A lot of strange things happened that I can't explain, that I'm not ill from, but also other people experienced it on the tour. And what I mean by I'm not ill from, it's like there's no reason for these things to have happened. So I swallowed, I tasted blood, I quickly left the room after saying, you know, my condolences to the, you know, hundreds of people who had lost their lives in that van, and just the pain and the sadness and everything that they must have been feeling. Shortly after that, we moved on to this area where you could see the basement of the house. And I kind of briefly mentioned in my last video that the basement of the house in which the Haunted Museum is located was actually the site for a lot of demonic rituals, among other things. And when I was looking into the basement, I saw something on all fours, and I couldn't tell what it was. Like, I couldn't tell if it was a person and anything, but I saw somebody standing down in the basement on all fours. And I'm gonna kind of jump in between what I was doing in the moment and then what happened after, because I wound up convening with my friends. And my friend Bree, I really wanted my friends to be in this video telling you guys what they felt too. But honestly, we were all so drained after the experience that no one really wanted to be on camera. And so my friend Bree later asked me, did you see something in the basement? And I said, yeah, it was on all fours. And she said, yeah, it was standing off to the right. And I was like, oh my God, we literally saw the same thing, but that was not the same time that we felt the same exact thing or saw the same exact thing. So that was freaky. And then we moved on to other rooms throughout the museum. One point that was pretty interesting was a room with a doll that was actually in a crazy murder case. Essentially, this dad like goes crazy one day and decides he's just gonna kill his whole family, and his son fired at him in self-defense. The daughter in this situation was actually in the room when it happened, and her doll was like splashed with the blood. And what I found really interesting was I was standing pretty far away from it, but I could not take my eyes off of this mannequin. And I understand mannequins in general are just kind of creepy, but this one, I don't know how to explain it to you. There was like something like weird about it. Like, it didn't have any eyes. And again, I understand that that's creepy, that's weird, but when I tell you there was creepy, weird stuff this whole time and none of it was catching me off guard, there was something so off about this mannequin. Like, so bizarre, and I can't really put a word on it, but I couldn't even look at the doll that we were getting the whole tour explanation on because I couldn't stop looking at this freaking mannequin. This little, it's like a short little mannequin, and it just doesn't have eyes. It's also smiling the entire time, which probably doesn't help. In that moment, my friend Bree said she was looking into the doll's eyes and literally watched the eyes change from like, I don't remember what shade that they were, but from like hazel or brown or blue or whatever to red as she was looking at it. And then that was the point where she just like looked down and she was like, okay, I can't look at that thing anymore. But I found it really interesting because in that room, again, something trickled down my throat. Again, but it didn't taste like blood. It just tasted like I had like swallowed water or something, but there was nothing in my throat. It was the most bizarre sensation I've ever experienced. I know what like spit feels like, you know what I mean? I know what it feels like to swallow saliva. This was just like not like that, and it was like a decent amount of liquid. It was almost like somebody had poured water like straight into my throat, and I just like felt it go down, and I literally like gasped because it felt so bizarre. When we left that room, Brie was like, I felt something so weird in my throat, and I was like, holy crap, this is so strange, because so did I. It was almost like water just like going down my throat. Later on in the tour, and I can't remember exactly what point that this was, Brie and I got stomach cramps in the same spot at the exact same time. It felt like it was afflicting both of us in a really, really similar way, but nothing could have prepared me. None of the serial killer files, none of the like crazy celebrity haunted paraphernalia, nothing. Absolutely nothing could have prepared me for what happened when I stepped into Peggy the Doll's room. The tour guide let us know before we went in that we greeted Peggy with respect, and we said goodbye before we left, which is interesting because when I filmed my video like 2 years ago on her, I was unaware of that. So I walked in the room with my friends, and immediately I just felt like I was alone. I felt like there was no one else in the room with me. As I'm talking about this, I'm getting like so cold, and like I just like have chills. It felt like I was totally alone in the room, and I could barely hear what was going on around me. As I was like looking at this doll, I don't know how to explain it except that it felt like it and I were the only two things in that room. And there were all of these dolls surrounding her, but I didn't even notice until right before I left because she was all I could see. I don't know how to explain it any differently. In that room, not to take away from the surprise, and I don't want to give anything else away, but they have a spirit box running pretty much 24/7 in that room with Peggy, which once again, I was not prepared for. They told us that the room was optional, and I stepped in and I still just wanted to stay and see what happened. And so I said, hello, Peggy, and the spirit box was silent. People were asking it questions. My tour was mostly my friends, but then there were a few strangers. There was also a subscriber in the tour, so hi if you're watching. Everyone around me was asking the doll questions, and it wasn't saying anything. And so I finally just kind of was like, hi Peggy, are you happy to be here? And immediately, like no pause, it said yes. And so somebody else asked it, like, how old are you or something like that. And again, just like silence, just like nothing. And so it continues to be silent in the room, and Jake my manager Jake kind of like nudges me, and he's like, you should just like ask it, see what happens. And I said something along the lines of, Peggy, we really appreciate your time. I was wondering if I could ask you how old you are. And again, instantly it said a number. Other people in the room thought it said 2. I heard 0, which of course is the sign of a demonic presence. So instantly, I was kind of taken aback. Again, everyone's trying to ask it stuff. I, at this point, was I was more than a little bit freaked out. And I was becoming aware of how strange I felt. Just like I couldn't see anything but her, and I could barely hear what was going on around me. It was very strange. I can't explain it. On top of that, my general rule of thumb is the minute that I know that something is demonic, I don't screw with it anymore. But then here I am in this room, and it's like, I'm never gonna get this opportunity again unless I go back to the museum. I don't think I would ever talk to Peggy again, but I'll explain why. And so everyone's just asking like weird stuff, like what's your favorite color? Like da 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 da, and like it's not answering. And I couldn't help myself, and I don't know why I couldn't help myself. But when it said 0, I just had to know. And I said, is your name really Peggy? And it started making this guttural, the most disgusting growl you've ever heard in your entire life. And it started just talking. and talking and talking, and everyone in the room was like, did it say I am? I think it said I am. And then meanwhile, like, it's like all I can hear is this deep man's voice just booming, like jabbering away, and I can barely hear any of it. But here's where it gets freaky. It sounded like chanting, and really weirdly similar, and I'm not making this up, to that like chanting sound that I heard in my room in my last like paranormal story time. Maybe it's related to the fact that I encountered this energy eventually. I don't necessarily think that time flows in just like a congruent line, especially not on like the other side. It could be that I interacted with this thing and then that manifested into something in like the past, in the moment. I don't know if this is making any sense. Maybe it has to do with it, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it was that I heard that chanting sound right before I fell asleep in my bedroom in Los Angeles, and hearing the chanting again in this moment from the spirit box just took me back to that. I don't know, but what I do know is in that moment, and recalling this, like when I tell you guys it is like 73 in here, I am just fine. It is late at night. I am not like on like caffeine, anything like that. I am like frozen to my freaking bones remembering this, and like my chest hurts remembering how this felt. But I hear this man just like chanting and grumbling and growling at me. I don't know what happened in the room at this point, because this was where it felt like somebody took their hands and just like jammed them down on my chest. I mean, like squeezing me. It felt so unbelievably painful, number one, but also, I don't know if it was because of this, I felt like I couldn't move. So I'm standing there, I can't look away from this doll. This is the point where I want to look away. The growling, the grumbling, the chanting is getting louder and louder and louder. And this is when I start to notice all of the dolls that are around Peggy, and it's almost like they're like growing in size at me. Like they're like all I can see. I would almost describe what happened as a panic attack, except I've never had a panic attack like this before. And I'm not ruling that out. Maybe that really did happen, and maybe I really did get that freaked out. But like, I feel like even the way I'm explaining this, you can't understand how freaky this moment was. It felt like I was going to die. Like this pain in my chest, and I felt like I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Even just remembering it like sends me into like kind of a weird place. And these dolls and her is all I can see, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. And just when I feel like I can finally break out of it and I'm like, I have to leave. I remember saying, I have to go. And I finally like broke away from like looking at them, and I turned, and that was when the tour guide walked in. And she said, oh, did Peggy talk for you guys today? Silence. Literally pure silence. God, this is weird to recount, because I don't know if it's that I'm like this scared or that this thing has this much power. I'm literally like dizzy like telling this story. Like it's really intense. I found out later from the other people on the tour, not even like my friends like trying to scare me or anything, which they wouldn't. I found out later that those people were like, oh, I just heard it say I am and then nothing else. Like it didn't say anything else. And meanwhile, all I heard was like this chanting and grumbling and growling through the spirit box, getting louder and louder until I couldn't even like hear myself breathing. So the tour guide asks Peggy at this point, is there anything else you'd like to say? And the doll is just silent, says nothing. Nothing is coming through the spirit box. And I'm about to like rush past her, and the tour guide quickly reminds me, she says, say goodbye, don't forget to say goodbye. And so he said, thank you, Peggy, goodbye. And then I just walked out, and I couldn't even control myself. It was such a relief to be out of there, but also like what I had experienced was such true fear in the moment that I just started like crying. And like in front of my friends who probably thought I was crazy, I couldn't even do the next room. They told us before we went in that it was an optional room because it contained demonic items. And so I was like, I'm just not even going to go in there. Like, I don't feel okay enough for that, etc. So I literally just started like crying. And like when I could finally put it into words how it felt like this thing was targeting me so specifically and so heavily. Like when we left, I just started crying. And again, I don't know if it was the relief. I don't know if I was genuinely that scared. I don't know if I was having a panic attack. I don't know. I know that my panic attacks don't feel like that. I have them not on a super regular basis anymore, but there was a time in my life where I had them like once a week minimum. But this was just unbelievable. And it really felt like this doll in the moment was almost saying to me like, oh, you thought like you knew what I could and couldn't do, like let me show you. If that even makes any sense. And maybe that's just, again, me like rationalizing it in my head, but it was honestly the freakiest thing I've ever experienced. I can't believe that I spoke to it through the spirit box. I believe that this doll is just as powerful as people say it is. I believe that this doll is possessed by something truly, truly powerful and truly, truly evil. And honestly, I don't think it's a coincidence that shortly after that experience, I was followed by the worst string of bad luck I have had in a long, long time. Nothing serious, nothing like life altering, but just like bad luck, because it seems like that's what everyone is followed by. So before I went in, I set my intentions and I said, you know, whatever I experience here, it stays here. And I believe that. I do believe it stays there. I don't think that I'm affected by it still. I will say that first night was really strange. I'm gonna skip over the rest of the tour because while it was really exciting and really cool and I had a really nice time, especially with the demon house room, that was fascinating. There's actually the real stairs from the demon house there with the like actual dirt that was there underneath, and the tour guide was telling us that the tour guides believe that the portal under those stairs, like the portal to hell, is still open. It was unbelievably interesting and I enjoyed every minute of it. But after that point, I felt so drained and so exhausted and so like scared that I was only like halfway there for the rest of the tour. So that night in Vegas when I went to bed, I couldn't sleep well at all. And I had really tried to push it out of my head. I had really tried to rationalize it, think it was a panic attack, whatever, which you guys can hear me doing in this video. I try all the time to make myself believe, just like sometimes I try to make myself believe that other people's paranormal stories are a misunderstanding. I try to make myself think that it's a misunderstanding so I'm not freaked out, but all night I was having dreams about this freaking doll. I was having dreams that I was in a chair and the doll had me not like roped up, but it was like I couldn't move. I was like pinned to the chair with my arms behind it, almost like I was roped up, but I wasn't physically. It was like it had me pinned in the chair. It was asking me all of these questions and I kept saying, I'm not gonna answer your questions. I don't even remember what they were, but I kept saying, I'm not gonna answer your questions. I don't wanna talk to you. Like, leave me alone. You can't be here. I would wake up and then immediately when I would go back to sleep, no matter how long I waited, 10 minutes, an hour, anything, it would go right back to this dream. But since then I felt a lot better, and I think that putting some distance between myself and Vegas has really helped. But that experience really changed my mind on Peggy the Doll and the reality of haunted dolls in general and the reality of haunted items. The museum takes a lot of care in making sure that their items are well protected. For example, the room with the Dybbuk box was just fully salted with sage surrounding it, and it was very eerie to view it, but I didn't feel like the energy from it like manifested outside of the box. It was super freaky to look at, but the Peggy exhibit was on another freaking level. So that was my story about my experience with Peggy the Haunted Doll, and hopefully I was able to accurately express to you guys exactly how it felt in the moment. I can honestly say, again, after experiencing this, I take the haunted doll thing so much more seriously than I did. I used to kind of be interested in haunted dolls, obviously, but sort of just like a lot of the times just think that probably a lot of them are fictional or maybe even just like exaggerated for entertainment, but I'm a firm believer. That was insane. And I hope you guys enjoyed this story time. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you very much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.